All right, welcome everybody to the Historic New Orleans Collection. I'm Daniel Hammer. I'm President and CEO of the Historic New Orleans Collection, and I'm very honored to stand up here today and introduce and get us started on our biannual Morrison Lecture in Historic Preservation. Before I start, I have to ask a very important question, which is, can everybody hear me? No. No. All right. What about now? Can everybody hear me now? Okay, all right, well, we're just gonna, well, that's a great tip, Michael, thank you. Yeah, there we go, okay. Well, this is an important program of ours. We do it every other year, and it's a collaborative effort of three wonderful organizations. The Vieux Carré Vieux Carré Property Owners and Associates, the Vieux Carré Commission Foundation, and the Historic New Orleans Collection. So above all else, I want to thank our partners, Aaron Holmes and Nathan Chapman, who is chair of the board of Vieux Carré. Aaron Holmes is the executive director, and Kim Rosenberg, who is the chair of the board of the Vieux Carré Commission Foundation, and that organization's new executive director, Jessica Schulman, who's brand new in that position, and I know as a board member of VCCF myself that we're really excited to have her on board. So these two organizations, Vieux Carré and the Vieux Carré Commission Foundation, they do great work for the French Quarter and for New Orleans, and we here at the Historic New Orleans Collection are very proud to partner with them regularly on many things, but especially on this program today. I'd like to kind of take a couple of minutes just to set the stage by reflecting a bit on 20 years since Hurricane Katrina as it relates to our work here at the Historic New Orleans Collection. When Katrina happened, I worked here in our research center, and in the years after the storm, my job was a reference associate in our reading room. So basically what I did was I helped researchers with their research, and a great deal of that research was about things relating to Hurricane Katrina, particularly the desire to document what life was like before Katrina in the places that were most heavily impacted, particularly the lower Ninth Ward in Lakeview. There was a lot of interest nationally coming around that topic, and a lot of producers of news magazines, of documentary films, of these types of things, who had done extensive work to engage the people who were affected by the storm, people whose houses had been destroyed, people who lived in these neighborhoods, hear their stories, hear what had happened to them so that they could share it with a national and an international audience. And of course, their stories always included a lot of information about how wonderful their neighborhoods were, about their wonderful memories of the movie theaters they went to as kids, of the streets that they played on, of the schools that they went to, which of course were now all destroyed. And so these producers would come here to the city's largest repository of materials relating to the history of the city, and they would say, we've got these incredible stories, we just need some pictures so that we can illustrate them for our audience. And 9 times out of 10, the answer was, well, you know, we don't have pictures of that, because the stories were about residential neighborhoods, they were about the places where people lived, and these just aren't the places that are documented significantly. You know, if they wanted a picture of downtown New Orleans, we had lots of those. If they wanted pictures of places that were along the lines of where, you know, streetcars were built or various major commercial developments took place, you know, we had lots of documentation of that. If they wanted, you know, to know how the Superdome was built, we could show them everything about that. But, you know, when it came to the lower Ninth Ward, Lakeview, other areas so directly impacted by Katrina and so much, you know, that the nation had suddenly become aware of, you know, we don't have that or didn't have that. And so for me, it really opened my eyes to the fragility of the historic record and the impact that the hurricane had on our future knowledge of what New Orleans is all about. You know, there's so much material that was lost in people's homes, and that material, we're never going to get the opportunity to add to our collection. You know, that's how a lot of things come in. People come to us eventually and they say, I can't care for this anymore. Can you care for it so it's there for posterity? And that's how our collection grows. And so a lot of the history of New Orleans will never be preserved in that way because of Hurricane Katrina. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to always remember. And it's really guided us at the Historic New Orleans Collection in our approach to cultural heritage stewardship since Hurricane Katrina. One thing that we've really focused on is oral history as a means to begin the process of building collections around important stories in history, and also to begin to document when it's still happening, to capture historic information from the people who are creating the history itself, and from there to build pathways to collecting material culture around that history. We have two incredible exhibitions on view right now at 520 Royal Street in our exhibition facility. One is about 50 years of the Vietnamese community in New Orleans, making it home, and one is about the civil rights era in New Orleans, the trail they blaze. Both of these exhibits are built around oral history initiatives that started over a decade ago and sought to collect information for posterity, beginning with talking to the people who knew it firsthand. And you know, our oral history initiatives really developed out of Katrina, and the investments we made in oral history as a way to document the Katrina experience in our community. Most notably, we did all of the after-action reporting for the New Orleans Fire Department, the New Orleans Police Department. We interviewed every single person who was on duty in those departments here in New Orleans during and after Katrina, as well as many other first responding agencies and public offices. And much of that material is under access restriction for 25 years because, you know, that allowed people to speak candidly, which was important for those agencies. And so we look forward 5 years from now to doing some really important work to engage the public around the history of Hurricane Katrina using those remarkable resources. But the important thing for us institutionally has been the direction that Katrina has led us in terms of our understanding of what it takes to steward this city's living history and culture so that it is there for posterity. And so I guess it's, what do you call that, a silver lining? And so I think that'll probably be something that is talked about today. 20 years after Hurricane Katrina, what out of that terrible event has led to the realities that just are today? And of course, a lot of that is positive, although there's lots that's negative, and certainly all of it is grounds for us to look forward and imagine a future that is what we want it to be. And so we are, I guess in the end, what can I say? We appreciate Hurricane Katrina for the ways that it has opened our eyes as an institution to what we need to do to better serve the community. And so I want to go ahead and move on with the program. And to do so, I'd like to introduce my friend Nathan Chapman, chairperson of VC Pora, who's going to say a few words and introduce our speaker.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Nathan Chapman. I'm here to welcome you, in particular on behalf of the Vieux Carre property owners, residents, and associates. Show of hands, how many people remember Mary Morrison? Yeah, a shrinking number, unfortunately. How many people remember Jacob Morrison? All right, one. So he died, unfortunately, in 1974. We lost Mary in 1999. Both were pioneers with my organization, VC Pora, but all of the groups can lay claim to them. Mary Morrison was on the board of VCC, the Vieux Carre Commission. Before she died, she donated her and Jacob's papers to the Historic New Orleans collection, so we all have a piece of their legacy. And in fact, I think the French Quarter as a whole is their legacy. So thank you for coming and honoring them in this way. So 20 years ago, I was president of VC Pora, which is the same position that I happen to hold right now. That's when we encountered Hurricane Katrina, or you know, we locals like to call it the storm. 80% of New Orleans flooded due to the failure of our levees. Now, that did not include the French Quarter or other historic neighborhoods along the river, because our founders were clever enough to find the high ground, even in a city that seems really flat to me. But while we didn't flood, everyone in New Orleans was impacted. whether physically, financially, and or emotionally. So I wish I could share a bunch of stories with you today. I'm just going to tell one at a time. So the city was facing a financial crisis. With most of the stores closed and zero tourism, all the tax revenue evaporated. So they had started having dramatic layoffs, and that included the Vieux-Carré Commission. Everyone was let go except for Director Larry Hastorfer and Senior Architectural Historian Hillary Irvin. In my decades with VC Pora volunteering, my proudest moment was when we asked our members to help, and guess what? Volunteers reported for duty at the VCC. They answered the phones. They accepted permit applications. They did the filing. One even had the background where he could be a volunteer inspector. Citizens kept the VCC office functioning until the city allowed rehiring, paid staff again, which was 22 months later. As New Orleans began to imagine its future, generous national foundations funded the Unified New Orleans Plan. UNOP brought to us America's most accomplished urban planners. In a process not unlike speed dating, they had an open house in which all the neighborhoods met all the planners. In District 1, which included the French Quarter and the Central Business District, we were fortunate enough to snag David Dixon to lead a team of professional planners and us citizens through a very lengthy process to point us to our recovery. David further lent us his talent when citizens used post-K idealism to vote to change our city charter to require a city master plan with the force of law. I have to note that right now the city is currently trying to wiggle out of the force of law part, but you can talk to me about that later. David led New Orleans in creating that first master plan. David has won dozens of national awards and no doubt thousands of admirers. He currently holds the position of Vice President and Urban Places Fellows at Stantec, where he leads planning and urban design initiatives. It's a cliche to say that in New Orleans we rely upon the kindness of strangers, but what is left unsaid is that those strangers often become our friends. New Orleans has no greater friend than today's speaker, so please welcome David Dixon.
So, Nathan, thank you very much. You read the words I wrote exactly as I wrote them. No, and it is wonderful to see all of you, and many of you do look very familiar, and I am really moved and honored, and there's a little bit of a sense of, am I going to be able to give you what you need here by this invitation to come back and to be back. And I want to thank very much the organizations who invited me, and I know that Nathan played a role in that, so thank you. And boy, do I remember that night. We were all very nervous. Okay. We're not done yet. A new era of opportunity and imperative for New Orleans. Originally, I'm sorry, I should take, this is my favorite photo in life. I actually took this. This to me symbolized, I'm going to talk about my history with New Orleans in a minute, but I came here fairly early, about a month and a half after Katrina, the first time, and saw this building, and it was so inspiring to me to just see the spirit, knowing what people had gone through. One of the most remarkable things I have to say is that I came to realize, it didn't occur to me initially, that everybody I was meeting hadn't earned a living for 2, 3, 4, 5 months initially. And you still showed up at meeting after meeting and were just so committed and tireless in your efforts and your willingness to share and work together. Sorry, now I tell a quick Nathan story. Nathan, to me, in some ways, embodies the planning spirit. He did actually 2 things. I have only reminded him one of them. The first, which I'm now going to tell him, how do I say this? I believe in community-based planning, getting people together, hearing from them. That was a little bit tough when we first showed up after Katrina to work on the UNOP process, on the recovery process. A lot of people weren't back. it turns out there was no sort of formal process for community engagement in New Orleans. This is unlike cities I'd worked in. So one of the first meetings we had was with Nathan and the good folks of the French Quarter and downtown stakeholders who apparently hadn't always met with each other. Anyway, and at the end of the meeting, Nathan said, you know, if we're going to make this work, we have to invite everybody else who didn't show up at this meeting, who we know we need to be talking to if we're going to all be able to support ourselves, each other when we're done. Meaning, we're not here to solve this. We're here to convene our fellows, whether they agree with us or not, to really come up with a future that we can all own and believe in. And I really appreciate that and respected it. And I've used that line over and over again. The other thing Nathan did, as we had finished, we did the plan for downtown in the French Quarter, and we had I won't mention his name, but a world-renowned urban designer and architect working with us who was a man of many opinions, I'll put it that way. Anyway, you can ask Nathan, who I'm talking about later. He's also a friend. He used to tell me to shut up and stop editing him when we were working together. Anyway, but he came and presented. He worked particularly with the folks in the French Quarter. And at our last public meeting, he presented his findings for the French Quarter, achieved by working with Nathan and a lot of other probably people in this audience, and he reported what his recommendations, his findings, and then he left because he had to go to 5 other meetings that day. And I was in the process of thanking everybody and saying thanks for coming together and participating in this and working together so we have a plan that we all own and believe in. And Nathan said, "I'm sorry, I got to say something here." Stood up and said, "Your colleague came and he asked us all what we thought, and he listened to all our needs, and he did a bunch of research, and he told us what he learned, and then he told us what his recommendations were, but he forgot to ask us if we agreed with them," and then left. So we put together a committee to do that. That to me really captured, both those together, captured the spirit of what planning is all about. Convene the full spectrum of who you are, work together, talk, find the common ground you can, and then make sure that you fully understand and agree with the recommendations people like me bring back, because you own them when we leave. So on that note, those were unplanned comments. Once again, this is one of my favorite photographs. So I'm here, originally the idea was to talk about how has the master plan endured over 20 years and what progress has been made from I can never find the right word. It's not commemoration, certainly, because why would one commemorate Katrina? But I guess how has the master plan influenced the 20 years since the storm, since the tragedy? And I actually felt I'm not actually fully equipped. You're all much better equipped to answer that question. I can tell you what it was meant to do, which I will do in a couple of minutes. But what I thought would also be really important, and luckily the conveners agreed, is to talk about an era of unprecedented opportunity ahead for New Orleans if you all continue working together the way you did then, and hopefully since, that builds on it's not just history and cultural diversity, et cetera. It is the living legacy, the living culture of New Orleans that positions you probably better than almost any city in America to grasp the opportunities ahead for our communities, for our country. And I want to emphasize that I'm not here to give you answers. I'm here to give you context, sort of how to think about what is the context as you plan going forward and think about the opportunities ahead. So I'm going to start with my own personal history. Somebody please laugh. This is, okay. Everybody I met when I got here said, "David Dixon, you're not the same David." "No, you're too." Anyway, at that point I was too young. That period is gone. Okay. I was doing with a colleague who actually came and worked with me here, Larissa Brown, on the master plan in Miami, a citywide parks and recreation plan. And speaking about community engagement, we had a week of solid community meetings planned. And the night of the first meeting, we heard that the mayor had canceled the week because there was a storm coming that they apparently called Katrina, and a hurricane. And we said, we're from Boston. Yeah. What does a hurricane actually mean? They said, oh, it's a level 1, I guess. What does that mean? Well, it's not too serious, but we'll probably lose electricity. The minute we heard we couldn't plug our computers in, we said, we're going to the airport tomorrow and flying home. And now think of what you all endured. But that to us was a crisis. I then was asked by the American Institute of Architects to help plan. Everybody had to do a recovery conference, come and help New Orleans. So the AIA wanted to show up and do a recovery plan. And I was asked to help plan it and met just some just amazing people. One woman who will go unnamed had flown back from New York to Baton Rouge, where we were planning to help organize this meeting, and mentioned incidentally that she was going to have a baby next week. I mean, just what people found in themselves, the energy, the strength you all found in yourselves, to me, was just remarkable. So we came to New Orleans, brought a group of terrific people, and we stayed in a hotel on Canal, and I yesterday remembered the name. I think it's some Marriott or something. But this is what the corridors looked like. This was not our corridor per se, but boy, was this an immediate recognition. They were mostly refugees, mix of refugees and FEMA workers. And this is what the hotel was like. And boy, was this a revelation to us of what life was actually like for the people that we had come to help, so to speak. And who they were and what the state was. There was this wonderful woman who spent the whole week with us. I remember she drove us around for a tour. I still can't find my photo, but I wish I could, of a car stuck in a tree that we saw at one point. Anyway, so I asked her, well, how did you fare? Well, her house had survived. It had flooded. Remarkably, 2 glass objects that she had inherited from her mother, and they'd been her grandmother's, survived untouched. They were still at the same place on a cupboard she had left them when she locked the door and thought that, well, my house is safe, I locked the door. Anyway, she said, but who knew refrigerators could float? And so then I happened to be the chair of the AIA Urban Design Committee a year later, and the Green Dot Plan got a whole lot of attention around the country, not much of it favorable. I was actually on a panel about a year after this, and I mentioned this is the way not to plan with a community. And the next speaker said, thank you, David. I was actually part of that planning. But anyway, so the Urban Design Committee decided we would come here to work with a couple of neighborhoods and do it right, find out what people actually needed, aspired to, believed in, and help in that way. And it was a remarkable experience. Again, if nothing else, just the commitment people demonstrated. But that's also when I learned something else about New Orleanians. You are the city where more people who live here live in the same city their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents live than any other city in America. And despite change and a lot of immigration, you still hold that status. And that had a whole lot to do with the devotion that people had to place and neighborhood. I was then involved in UNOP, the citywide United New Orleans plan, which was actually about recovery. And here, it was about understanding what it's like to be the only person back in your neighborhood on your block. Or neighborhoods like the Gentilly. I wrote an article for the Boston Globe, an op-ed, saying one reason none of us understand the real impact of Katrina on people of this dear city and just who they are is because when we look at photos of New Orleans, most of the houses are all still there. witnessed this block in Gentilly. But none of us who don't live here realize that no one can live or even step foot in any of these houses because they're full of mold. The rest of the country really had a hard time grasping the severity, that's not even the right word, the totality of the impact on your lives and every aspect of them. And then a chance to work on the master plan, which is, to me, the proudest project I've had a chance to do in my not overly long life. And there are a few things I just want to mention about this. When people, and I'm going to be very direct here, when people would ask me after I worked in the master plan, well, how should a city prepare for a natural disaster? And first I'd say, well, you can't. But I would then say, solve your racial differences first. Because to be blunt, one of the biggest challenges of the master plan, and we actually won an award from the American Planning Association called a hard-won victory around this, was the fact that often Black New Orleanians would look at a recommendation and say, well, that's for white New Orleans, or in reverse. And we actually brought this fellow, Bill Gilchrist, who then came and actually at my recommendation, became the mayor's planner for New Orleans. He was the plan director in Birmingham, Alabama. And in Birmingham, I had worked there, people can't stop talking about race. They just want you to talk about race. And we brought him here we had some large public meetings and small meetings, et cetera, to talk to people about how to talk about race, because we realized a master plan that belongs to, is inspired by and authored by the whole community has to be one where the whole community can talk together and work together. Is this making sense? And I hope this is not patronizing anyway, but it's, and the other photos here are to emphasize that we knew this had to be as community-based as possible, because again, everybody had to own it and had to have talked to their neighbors so they collectively owned it, if this makes sense, as a community. And this is gonna, okay, well now I'll tell you why. So I was asked by the AIA's publication, Architect Magazine, what the master plan had, and there's supposed to be a T there, meant for New Orleans. It wasn't the details that I thought about, because frankly, the details only last as long as the circumstances around which those details were meant to respond to, but some fundamentals. And to me, what was important about the master plan, if anything, was the process that you all engaged in with us, which was to build a culture of planning. Because when we got here, the impression we had was that it was politics, not planning, that determined what got developed, where the city invested. There was no common community-based goal, vision, or vision set of goals that would inform all policies, all development decisions, all citywide investments and neighborhood investments, because they're all intended to achieve this larger mission, this sense of what does this community look forward to being as it moves forward. So the plan was intended to be a legitimate, credible, because everyone had worked on it, everyone could believe in it. Is this making sense to folks? Okay. Foundation for, and you can read the list, zoning, refilling empty lots, establishing the essential role of equity. And not just equity as a moral issue, but a pragmatic issue. Because if people aren't going to benefit something, they're not going to vote for it. And they're not going to vote for councilors who support it. So, and as a basis, one of the debates that was most frustrating to us, because it was so artificial, was between preservation and innovation. And there were definitely two sides on this issue. To us, it was preservation that unlocked innovation for New Orleans. And in fact, that's about to be what the rest of my talk is going to focus on. So just get ready. And we hope to have put that debate to bed. The rest of us, I know you're all going to come and tell me afterwards we didn't fully, but I hope we did. And finally, it was to forge a compact that nurtured a new culture of planning so that in the future, if something needed to change, everyone would get together and plan for it. What were their needs? What were their aspirations? What were the realities in the market, et cetera? What city investments were necessary? Was this, were recommendations equitable so that everyone benefited? Rather than end up in a political debate where everyone was trying to call city councilors and say, this is the liquor industry's recommendation, et cetera. And you can all think about that. So, on a personal note, I said, and this is so you don't think I'm making it up now, that I'm old enough, I'm really old now, but I was old then, to have planned all over the place. I've been lucky to do that. And New Orleans had the least, and I think you'll recognize this term, NIMBYism, of any place that I've worked. That when you all worked with us, you were civic, you were committed, and realistic. People did not want pretty pictures or empty promises. They, in fact, it was very clear. If we had an idea, they want to know how is it going to be achieved, how is it going to be paid for, and politically was it achievable, and how can we make it achievable? The fact that you just showed up for meetings and in such numbers and were so generous with each other in listening to each other, actually particularly across racial lines, is something that was really meant something to me personally. And what I came to realize, it was the grassroots that had brought New Orleans back. This was not it was you who brought your city back. This was not a top-down process. It was genuinely bottom-up. And that is a whole lot to do with what I'm going to talk about too in terms of going forward. So I also had other experiences. I can't to come back and work with just amazing people on the Livable Claiborne Communities plan. I won't talk about these. And actually, I'm going to be working with Ray Manning's office, Manning Architects, on planning for New Orleans East and the housing in Hano on properties that they don't need, surplus properties. And I am really looking forward to coming back and working with many of you on these. And so show up whenever we have a meeting. Okay. All right. So now what I want to talk about is a new era of imperative, urban imperative. Challenges and opportunities for cities, actually, another typo, across the developing world, and that includes New Orleans. And I say that because I've never been to a city where so many people said, we're not like any other place. I can't tell you how often I was reminded you're the northernmost Caribbean city in anyway. The reality is you're a developed world city in addition to, they're not exclusive to your uniqueness and Caribbeanness. And so this talk assumes that the US and the Caribbean dimensions of who you are got married, found a shared future with each other, and I'm going to focus on the US part. And the context for planning. I can't, one of the things that made this very hard is I kept thinking, I've got to come with solutions. I can't come with solutions because I haven't worked on a plan with all of you for 20 years. But what I want to talk about is the context that I hope all of you think about and talk about with each other so that everyone, for planning, so that everyone can make fully informed decisions together for themselves and together. And that starts with the economic imperative because we have entered an era in which economic growth is going to be dominated not by natural resources extraction, that's a polite way to say gas and oil, not by having more lawyers downtown or even hospitals, and not a service economy. It is an idea economy. It is the next best idea that shapes the next generation of AI or technology or cures for cancer, et cetera, that are where value is really achieved and where the jobs of the future are being created. So what those bars will tell you is that virtually all the jobs net new jobs, increased jobs for the next 20 years are going to require some higher education. And in the idea economy, these folks are referred to as talent. And I'm going to promise that this talk is going to grow less elitist, but not for about 5 minutes. So just bear that in mind. So what is going on right now? Well, the US workforce would actually be shrinking today if it were not for immigration. This is not a political statement. It is a reality. And you all probably have heard about the economic impact of ICE raids on the construction industry, on restaurants. We need every worker we can get these days. So the growing workforce shortage is having a particular impact on the idea economy, the part of our economy that really promotes growth at a local level as well as a national level. So by, the dates disappeared here, but by 2030, there will be 11 million more jobs that require some higher education than there'll be people to fill them. That's costing the US economy will cost by 2030, more than $5 trillion that year in lost output. That reality comes home to every city and region in this country to some extent. What is happening is, and I remind us all, we're also going increasingly diverse. So boy, do we need to welcome everybody who wants to come to our community because we need them, regardless of culture or anything else. Just keep that in mind too. And everybody has a contribution to make today even greater than the folks who showed up to help with recovery. AI is not changing this. AI does not mean that we're not going to need all these educated, skilled, creative folks. It means that their jobs are going to probably require more education, more skill, more talent, because the less complicated parts of their jobs, AI will do for them, and they have to upskill, in effect. So what is happening is that the investment and jobs that the idea economy generates, and again, this is where economic growth comes from for everybody, are following this talent. People don't go where jobs are these days. Jobs go where people are. And what do these folks want? And now please think about your dear city. Where do they move to? Again, they don't follow a job. There was a stage in my life where I thought, I'm going to have to move from Boston to Houston to get a job. Believe me, nope, I didn't. But nobody looks at the world that way anymore. So this talent, and again, these are educated folks, and I promise once again, this is going to become less elitist in a few minutes, are want to live in mixed use, walkable, amenitized, and I use the words here again, I'll say cool places to eat, drink wine, beer, run into each other, and increasingly diverse. People get that you can't live in a white bubble or a black bubble or an Hispanic bubble anymore. We all need each other simply because there aren't enough of any of us. And places that are really community rich, I'll mention multicultural again, and have a sense of authenticity. Places, and that doesn't mean that they're necessarily historic, but think of living legacy, living culture, places that value who they've been and what that means for them today. Is this making sense to folks? So now, just remember the strengths you all bring to this. So then I couldn't help this photo. But you have no idea how appealing this would be to somebody in Iowa, North Dakota, Boston, etc. Okay. But there's something else. It's not that these jobs and investment look for. It's not just educated workers or people who can do the job. It's also places that promote, and the term of art here is creative collisions. And just to show that it's not just me who came up with this, Brookings Institution, many of you may know of, which pay a whole lot of attention to urban dynamics these days, defines creative collisions as spontaneous or unplanned meetings between two people who actually don't even work together, or work for the same company. I'm not sure how essential that is. But the whole point is these creative collisions are where ideas are born, where people sit down and when they get up, have a shared idea that none of them brought to that meeting. Is this making sense? Or that lunch, or that beer, because they generally aren't meetings. I do a lot of work with innovation companies and districts. And we're working on a district in Canada called Canada North, the largest, most established innovation cluster in Canada. It's in Ottawa. Unfortunately for them, it's in suburban Ottawa in a former industrial park that became a tech park, then a software park. So they really needed to create the equivalent of downtown Ottawa there. And the reason they gave for that were two. If people aren't living here and can't walk here, they're not going to come work here. Well, that was three. They're not going to want to do any of that if there aren't enough of them to support all the cool bars, food, and it really came down to beer that bring them places. But three, they said, our innovation productivity index, and what's that, is down. Well, that's the flow of new ideas into our companies. We need 1,000 ideas if we can commercialize one of them. Think of a funnel, lots of ideas come in, et cetera. How they measure that, I don't have a clue. But boy, did they take it seriously. And what the owners of Canada North said, we're going to lose all our companies. They're going to move to Seattle if we can't. We can probably attract talent, but if we can't get people running into each other and having ideas that they bring back, we got to go to another city. It's that important. Well, now think about what just happens naturally in the core of your dear city. So here we have a city that is the historic heart of the city, let me just say, that is better equipped to attract the talent that attract jobs and investment and to nurture the creative collisions that can't be planned because you are, if ever there were a place that promotes interaction and shared community, it is New Orleans and the heart of New Orleans. This means that you are better prepared than virtually any city I know to succeed going forward in the foundational requirements for creating a really robust idea economy. And it's not going to be that simple by the time I'm done either, but just the potential is here. And one thing, of course, it starts with, I said I wasn't going to come with solutions, but I can't avoid this one, is making sure that the living and evolving culture, you didn't have the strong Hispanic presence. We did the master plan that you do now, or it wasn't as strong. Cultures are never static. They're expanding the culture that you could all celebrate and the richness you can bring to the street and all share. But no matter whether it's West African traditions or anything else, we've got to make sure that culture bearers are supported, and that means affordable housing and jobs and other things. And this is way more specific than anything I've said because it's so important. And that includes people who preserve the wonderful built heritage you have. So now I want to talk about another dimension of change, of context, which is our demographics. So I'm going to ask you a question. How many people in this audience think you might move in the next 10 years? Not that many. Boy, are you a settled group. Okay. Now, how many of you intend to have a child in the next 10 years? And somebody has to raise a hand. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. So the reality is that by 2040, 1 out of 4 households in the U.S. will include a kid. The other 3/4 won't. We're not there yet, but we're going to be there because 70 to 80% of the net new households over the next 20 years, and this varies per region, but not by much, are going to be singles and couples without kids. They are the housing market. What do they want? The same places this talent wants. Walkable, mixed use, amenitized, community rich, et cetera. So a city that can offer this, places that can offer this are going to be in immense demand. Is anybody here from City Planning Commission? Okay, I know somebody was. Anyway, they're going to be our client, and I'm working for Ray Manning. But I'm going to go ahead and say, a place like New Orleans East is a place of opportunity to a greater extent today than it has ever been. Because, first of all, The market is there. Housing is 2/3 of our real estate market to create a wonderful place. Housing is a tool, it's not a goal in itself. If you can get 1,000 net new housing units within a 5-minute walk, you can bring a block of a walkable Main Street to life. And that probably more than anything else means cool places to eat, drink, and have fun and run into each other. But meaning today, New Orleans East is an amazing opportunity for New Orleans to create, for those who live there and those who will live there, one of the coolest new urban neighborhoods in America, and something that can really be another crown jewel for New Orleans. 20 years ago, it would have been a lot harder because we didn't have the market foundation we do today. Is this making sense to folks? So don't tell anybody I said this because we haven't done the plan yet. But all right. So what this basically graph points out is that, again, all the new folks who are going to show up looking for housing that they don't have, or a very large percentage of them, are going to be looking for places that are what New Orleans offers so richly or can. They're not going to look like this, but they're going to be the 21st century version. Okay, we have one other major change coming. How many of you have heard of autonomous mobility? Somebody, please raise your hands. You're supposed to all know. Okay, all right. If we think about it, the universal access to cars after World War II changed our communities more. We didn't plan for it all. We didn't manage that change. It changed our communities out from under us and had really tough impacts on a whole lot of downtowns. And we all know the story. And it's the birth of suburbia. Well, we are on the cusp of a new mobility revolution that will be just as impactful. And it's going to start with the U.S. automobile fleet turns over every 15 years. Okay. I'm not going to ask how many of you depend on your car to get around instead of transit, because I wish you all use transit, but we all use our cars. So anyway, this makes it's turnover in our auto fleet is hugely important. 15 years from now, we'll all be driving connected vehicles that talk to each other, talk to the side of the street, et cetera. This will have all kinds of implications. Among others, they can also park. In the future, if you're going to a dense urban place, the heart of the city, or a neighborhood that's short of parking spaces, you will say to your car, and please excuse this, go park yourself, because cars will be able to do that. Then they'll park within inches of each other, and they'll say, please back up so I can get in. They'll also drive within inches of each other. They won't be able to bump into each other, meaning we've got a whole bunch of extra roadway width. We have parking we have built and invested in that will be able to accommodate many more cars and therefore support a whole lot of new square footage, particularly in downtown, devoted to housing that will bring streets to life and further enrich New Orleans. But then comes autonomous mobility. And and I'm not talking about Teslas all driving themselves, which for a while really scared urbanites because they thought, oh, everyone's going to get in their Tesla, play some intriguing computer game, particularly if they're 19 years old, and head out to the wilds of suburbia. Well, it turns out that's not what's going to happen, and please take this on faith, because boy, do I talk to a lot of people, because we aren't the America of the 1950s, where everyone was having families, becoming middle class, and trying to get out of the working class neighborhoods they'd grown up in. We're not that America anymore. We're an America that increasingly wants to live close to each other, particularly because we don't have kids, if that makes sense. So what this mobility revolution is going to do is really reward places where there's a real concentration of people and destinations who want to use shared autonomous mobility, which is not going to be like sharing a cab today. It'll be designed so people feel privacy, et cetera, which will mean that if you live in a nice urban neighborhood and think most of the heart of New Orleans, your mobility costs will be cut probably by 50% or more. It'll be a subsidy to live in the heart of the city, and it'll be much more convenient because it's going to be a nuisance to own your own car. It'll be much more convenient to press a button, 2 minutes later it shows up, whatever kind of vehicle you need, you go someplace and don't pay for parking. This is going to enhance the competitive position of communities like New Orleans that are naturally dense. And again, is this making sense to folks? Let me just say, if you don't agree with me, don't raise your hand, no. If I'm not making sense, tell me, because I want you to at least understand if you don't believe. So where is all this leading us to? Well, you've probably heard a lot, at least if you're a planner, about 15-minute cities where you can, within 15 minutes, live, work, play, learn, etc. The real future is around 5-minute districts, places, because most of us, particularly in hot, humid places, don't walk more than 5 minutes. We may claim that we do, that's a quarter mile. But if we can find environments where we can live, work, play, learn, engage each other, meet new friends, all those cool things that urban places allow within a 5-minute walk, that's where all that talent I mentioned wants to live. That's where all that housing market wants to go. And now just think about who you are and who's going to want to be here, because there are a lot of folks, and they're the folks that build a new economy. So again, think of New Orleans is a poster child for 5-minute communities. So what impact has this had? Well, when I first worked in New Orleans, you were a port city with a very substantial visitor economy that was coming back. I still remember somebody from the Convention and Visitor Bureau. I was there to interview him, and he got a call from the mayor announcing that the water department was turning off all the water service in downtown just when the first convention was coming back to New Orleans. Anyway, there's a problem with being a port city. Well, first of all, port cities aren't really the future, but with having being dependent on a visitor industry. How many people think it's a high-wage industry? And don't even raise your hand. Okay. It's a real challenge to be a successful city that depends on a relatively low-wage service economy, particularly these days. And I can talk more about these days later, but there are a whole lot of reasons why cities are going to need to grow more affluent. And again, we're going to take the edge off of this in a minute. And build a new economy, because you're going to, as we grow older, you'll need to be a wealthier city. If we're going to build the affordable housing, we need to be a wealthier city. We're all learning we can't depend on the federal government for a lot of things. There are a whole lot of goals we have for our communities that we're going to have to pay for. So we don't have a choice about whether to be a low wage or a higher wage city anymore. That's meant as a tough message, but is that making sense to folks? Okay. All right. So it turns out that a lot has been changing in New Orleans. First of all, when Katrina hit, about a quarter of folks in this city had a bachelor's degree. That number is, in 2023, was 45%, and it's heading toward 50%. And there are a whole bunch of reasons for this. Folks who moved in, more folks getting an education, et cetera. But let me tell you, if this number were still anywhere near 26%, you would be in deep trouble going forward. A number approaching 50% is terrific, and that's the first thing that anybody wants to and figure out where their company wants to invest next will look at. And then let's see what others are saying. Number one for workforce training. I had never heard of business facilities, but I learned out this is the primary media for folks who make investment decisions in terms of where to go for their companies. So it pays to they're paying attention. Most dynamic city in America, you can read the list. I like number 4, or fourth coolest city in America. And you know, Forbes may sound kind of dull, but when they say that, it means something. And then I'm going to skip to the last one. City Lab, top 10 cities, quote, top 10, quote, best U.S. place to live car-free. Nothing correlates more with being under the age of 35 and having a college degree or some higher education than not wanting to have to lead an auto-dependent life. Nothing correlates higher. That really means something. And walkable is generally, people like transit, but walkables and bikeables what really matters. So what's all this turning into? You've got a real explosion of startups in this city. I saw various data points, so I thought you probably better are finding that number out exactly, and it's rapidly growing. That's really important, because when you look at the companies that create new jobs these days, It's not the Amazons and Googles of the world. It's not mature tech innovation companies, certainly not industrial companies, it's certainly not natural extraction companies. It is startups that create the majority of net new jobs. And when you're growing startups, 5 years from now, those startups are going to be a whole lot of new jobs. So, but keep your living culture going so they stay here and grow here. Okay. Now, now a full stop. And do any of you remember Marshall Trujillo IV? Okay. He is one of my personal heroes. I learned more from him in the master plan, the UNOP process and master plan, I think, from almost anybody I can think of, about humane planning, planning that really was about people who need it. So much of what I'm going to talk about here I can credit to Marshall. But he started, well, let's say, it starts with saying it's not enough just to be more competitive for a knowledge economy because you've got talent, et cetera. You got to do things that make sure that this expanded economic opportunity extends to everyone. And there are some very real things you can do. You know what? I'm not going to go through this whole list now because I'm going to talk about it in a minute. But basically, what this is saying is that we really need to bring people into the workforce who are isolated from it. Think any parent, not just a mother, of a single child. You can dangle every job opportunity you want in front of that parent if they can't trust the school and daycare system in their community. If you have a jail record, and when I first got to New Orleans, you prided yourselves, not you, but big U, on incarcerating more adult men, guess who they were, per capita than any other city in America. Guess what that meant? That meant there were more adult men per capita in this city than any city in America who couldn't get a job for the rest of their life unless somebody stepped in and cured that record and said, these people are rehabilitated. Marshall really opened my eyes to how many things you need to do before you give people skills to bring them into the workforce, make it possible for them to work. All right, let me jump ahead because I talk about this in more detail. So again, what we really have to start with is how we translate economic opportunity into something, an innovation economy, a knowledge and idea economy, into benefits shared by all. And one quick piece of data I want to give you so you have confidence in this path comes from the city of Buffalo. We did a lot of work in the city of Buffalo, and we did it when Buffalo had a black mayor who cared a great deal about the black population in Buffalo. Buffalo, Rust Belt city, very hard hit. Buffalo has started to come back. They're really cool. They have a different kind of cool, but they're attracting a lot of idea, economy, talent, et cetera. And they're working really hard at doing that. And the mayor was a little conscious of the fact that a lot of people said, well, this isn't about me. We don't want to be a city about them. We want to be a city about us and our needs. And so the mayor commissioned a study of what were the benefits of they use the term knowledge economy worker for Buffalo. And the most important fact that emerged from that was that each new knowledge economy worker triggered five new jobs across the skills spectrum. And I've asked a lot of people about this, and it's very true. What in effect this is saying is you can't benefit anybody if you can't grow your economy in the first place. But then you have to do the things that translate economic growth to everybody. So not only do you bring this knowledge worker who then wants to spend money and do all kinds of things to create other jobs, you also have to then bring people into the workforce and give them the training. Is this all making sense? So. But the bottom line here is that celebrating your idea economy is about everybody. And one of the things to remember is that a job alone doesn't lift somebody out of poverty these days. 44% of all workers aged 18 to 64 earn an hourly wage that is at or near the poverty level. It's giving people the skills and training to get good jobs. And one of the things we learned actually in working, looking at, well, in New Orleans, let me just say, is the, what does it really take to move somebody out of a situation where there are a lot more of them than there are jobs to a situation where they really have a choice? And it turns out it takes about 2 years of training or education or just in really relevant and intentional skill building. But it makes a difference. 2 years is expensive. It takes time. It takes a really strong nonprofit network. It takes city leadership, but boy, does it pay off. And it ensures that as all the culture bearers attract folks to New Orleans, that process is benefiting everybody. I'm trying to make as many connections here as I can. And something else that I've learned over there, I've done a lot of planning around the transformation of the public housing model we have in this country has failed. It was failing, now it's failed. So all over the country, housing authorities are turning public housing into mixed income housing. One thing most of them are doing that is important is maintaining the same number of public housing units. So if there were 100 public housing households, there's 100 units for them, and maybe even more. But creating mixed income housing, where probably at least 60% of the units are market rate or for other folks who are not in poverty. And this has all kinds of benefits. And I'll illustrate this best by an anecdote. We're doing planning for about 1/3 of the public housing in Alexandria, Virginia. And a lot of folks wanted it to go away. And we were there to plan to transform it all into mixed income housing. And I still remember this woman raising her hand and saying, "Mr. Dixon, do you realize that 5 years from now, if somebody is killed because a public housing resident stayed in this city," and I bet this is telling me to hurry up. Okay. Thank you. Okay. You're going to be responsible. But ultimately, this was approved and supported, and is happening. And we, at one point, took folks on a tour of mixed income housing developments around Washington. And we would talk to market rate and public housing residents, and they all were very enthusiastic. And this one woman who had moved from public housing said her husband was unemployed, and he was washing in the basement parking, washing his car, and there was a fellow next to him washing his car. They had a conversation. Turns out that her husband was unemployed. The other guy said, "Oh, my company's hiring," and the fellow got a job. She said, "Do you think living in public housing, anyone even imagined the phrase, 'my company's hiring'?" They were stuck in a bubble, and getting out of that bubble is about not affordable next to market, but mixed income housing. All right. And then finally, creating common ground. You can't just say to everybody, "You're welcome." You have to proactively invite by saying, what does every age, every culture, every whatever, and this lesson we learned in Miami, right before Katrina, how do you proactively invite, have things that they all want to do, and then find ways to get them to interact? And let me tell you, a splash pad for kids of all different races, et cetera, is like magic, because their parents all stand around watching, and then they start talking to each other. So that's part of a common ground. And this is just to remind us that all of this conversation is not just about the heart of New Orleans, because that's really what I'm talking about. That's the source of its future. But it's making sure that what the heart of New Orleans accomplishes is for the entire city, including all the folks who live here. And just remember, they have to vote for the things that you believe in. And of course, an education system that everyone can trust and believe in, protection, are also really critical. These cannot be ignored just because you have a lot of opportunity. That opportunity will never achieve its promise without paying attention to these details. And one thing I want to also point out, no city can afford to protect itself. Many of America's most valuable cities are on coasts, on one of the two coasts, or three coasts, that are also very vulnerable. Boston is very vulnerable. And I think New Orleans should organize a league of cities affected by rising sea levels or something, really to start making the national case, because it's something we have to do as a society. You just showed the way. So to conclude, okay, in a constantly changing world, managing change for public benefit is really what all of us are here to do, I think, and particularly as I know many of you. So that's about building on a living legacy and culture, leadership that convenes community-wide conversations. They don't happen on their own. Somebody steps forward, a mayor, a nonprofit leader, and says, we've got problems, we have to start talking about them. Identifying a mission, vision, and goals supported by real strategies that guide everything a city does, and that many of you do, so they're all toward a common purpose. Memorializing this in a plan, a document everybody can turn to and say, we authored this, we own this. To get back to something mentioned earlier, we want all of you to follow it, because in following it, you're doing what we've asked you to do. And then using this plan, again, as the common source, the single inspiration for the wide range of policies, initiatives, zoning and other development regulations, incentives, all the things that the actual tools that you use to build your future should all be working toward the same mission and goals established in that plan. And now I'm going to ask seriously, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you for inviting me back. This means a lot to me. And thank you. I'll just say thank you again. So now I'm going to invite some terrific colleagues to come up. They will introduce themselves. We will have a conversation that none of us has planned, so it will be spontaneous. And you'll actually hear some comments from them first, and then a discussion about things I've said and that matter to you. So again, thank you. Okay, so let me first invite Mitchell.
Oh, wow.
I have notes here. To make some opening comments, and then your colleagues will join you, follow you.
Good to go, good to go. Did not expect to go first, but here we go. So, we kick this off. I'm Mitchell, Burdell Mitchell, my full name.
And you're actually here to talk about Baton Rouge. No, never mind, sorry.
And so, just a little bit about me. I am a resident of New Orleans, born and raised. I'll start off, I'll get a whole thing so people from New Orleans can know exactly the type of person or guesstimate. I graduated from Fisk Howard Elementary. I went to New Orleans. It's New Orleans Charter now, but it was Renaissance. And then because I was an excellent student, they said that I needed to, take my talents elsewhere. And I graduated middle school from Bell, Andrew J. Bell. Then I went to McMain. Then I graduated from SUNO. And I went to some other institutions. They don't really matter. That's all of the things that y'all needed to know. From the Ninth Ward. I say I'm from the Ninth Ward. That's why I came of age. And then military, Marine Corps. And did some things and then came back and began my real professional career as a band director. So a marching band director in New Orleans, Berman Charter School. And from then, operations, got into all sorts of educational operations and started taking on more things and all of that stuff. And now I'm the co-executive director of the Broadmoor Improvement Association. And to speak about what our association does, should I go on with that, or should I pass the mic to somebody else for the intro?
Why don't you go over it quickly?
Quickly?
And then,
All right.
Since I took too much time, sorry.
Sure thing. So, Broadmoor Improvement Association was one of the neighborhood community groups that it existed way before Katrina. Its history is opposition to all sorts of things like blockbusting, like the big green dot in all of those things. And we'll talk about a little bit more of what the Broadmoor community does, what we do in an improvement association a little bit later.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marla Nelson. I'm a professor of planning at the University of New Orleans. I am not from here, but this time around, I've been living in New Orleans for well over 20 years. And I'm really excited and honored to be here. So thank you to the Historic New Orleans Collection, VC Pora, and the VCC.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm also very honored to be here. My name is Myra Pineda. I'm the president and CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana. I'm originally from Honduras, Central America, and New Orleans became home in 1980. And I have been here as a business owner, as a diplomat, and in many roles that prepared me to what I'm doing now, which is leading an amazing organization for Hispanic businesses, trying to facilitate and upskill and prepare business owners for access, opportunities, growth, and definitely workforce preparedness. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I've been asked to ask you a couple of questions. What I'd most love to do is hear what questions you have, but from what I said and what you think are most important for folks to hear today, but I will start with one question, which is, from each of your perspectives, meaning it takes all of us together to get this right. Let me say, so it doesn't have to be just from your perspectives, what you do, what you care about. What do you think are some of the most important initiatives that the city should take leadership in promoting over the next couple of years to enhance quality of life, economic opportunity, equity? And nobody knows I was going to ask this. So.
Yeah, I'll lead in, especially because the organization that I represent and the neighborhood that I represent is doing a lot of the work and has been doing some of the things that you spoke about in your presentation, those walkable communities, those 5-minute neighborhoods, the affordable housing, the things that get people to want to stay in your city. And so we know, because we're from here, the prices around the home prices, the rent prices around those neighborhoods that have those sorts of amenities are rising. They're insane. I would just call it what it is. They're insane. And especially for a population who has a lot of people who are earning those wages because they are in this tourist economy. And so it just pushes people to the fringes. And I think the work that needs to be done is making those neighborhoods, and protecting those neighborhoods as well. And so doing all of the things in concert with all of the other things, and then providing all of the support. So the answer is everything.
All right. Well, first off, I mean, I agree with what Mitchell said, and certainly I think that David had a great presentation, a lot of very interesting and inspirational ideas. I'm an urban planner. I have my background in economic and regional development. So when we hear David with this presentation, we say, sure, that makes sense. But what I think we really need to emphasize is that here in New Orleans, in the greater New Orleans region, we have to invest in our people. We can talk about what a special place it is, why we should be so attractive to newcomers. We're here. We know what's good about it. We also know what we can improve upon. But I think that historically, and I've only been here for 20 some years, sometimes we overlook ourselves and what we have, and we focus a lot on how to attract others here. And it was really difficult preparing for this. I was told I had like 8 minutes to reflect upon, 20 years after Katrina. And we did a lot right, but there were also things we didn't do right. What disasters do is they highlight where we have these inequities, and that became very clear after Katrina. But where we made an error, and we know this hopefully, is that some of our policies and programs made it really difficult for people who are the culture and the place of New Orleans, to come back. And I think now, as Mitchell's talking about, we can see when I first moved here, New Orleans was affordable, right? Coming from the Northeast, it was like, oh my goodness. It's not like that anymore. And I know all of us are very concerned about insurance. And so how do we really protect the place so that the people who make it special can stay? So that means investing in education. I work for a beleaguered public institution, right? Investing in education, investing in workforce development, and protecting neighborhoods. So we want to encourage other people, but if we can make this place stronger by investing in people, that'll happen a lot more naturally.
Definitely, I have to. I definitely echo your comments. And David, one thing that you mentioned repeatedly during your presentation was the importance of working with the community and how they showed up. Despite all of the challenges they were facing in their personal lives, they were there for meetings after meetings. And we see that, and I think we need to really look at the lessons that Katrina left, and unfortunately, some of them apparently didn't sink in because we went through COVID and we had this similar challenges. In my case, with the Hispanic community particularly being disproportionately impacted, but as you know, the Hispanic community was here 100% ready to rebuild this city after Katrina. So the rebuild, the recovery, and we need to remember those things. So my organization is totally dedicated to fostering that environment that will help, and working in areas for the grassroots community too, because if we lift all ships, everybody will benefit from it. So better communications, working with these grassroots organizations is very critical for the preparedness for the natural disasters, and definitely for the recovery and rebuilding of the area after. I think we still have a long way to go in those areas, but there are so many amazing organizations that are ready and willing to do the work with the city.
Does anybody want to add any comments to each other's comments, or?
Sure. All right. One of the other things that I think that the city and the region and everybody involved really needs to do is protect those workers, the people that really can't afford the housing. One of the things that our organization is doing to protect that very vulnerable population is by becoming a property developer of sorts. And so one of the arms of the Broadmoor Improvement Association is the Broadmoor Affordable Rentals and Broadmoor Development Corporation, which those are specifically my things. And what those two entities are tasked with doing is, one is acquiring and developing properties to be sold to persons who represent less than 80% of the median income. It's a fancy way of saying we buy land, develop properties to sell them to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford a property in Broadmoor. What does this look like? This looks like a home that can sell for $250,000, $325,000 being sold to someone for $150,000, $175,000. That's what we're doing in Broadmoor to kind of help that, and to have the city and other organizations partner with other organizations to have more of that. When we're talking about the 5-minute city, the 15-minute city, that neighborhood, that would just protect people and give opportunities to those laborers and the people that are in the tourist economy to be able to have that pathway to home ownership, which all studies point to is a pathway out of poverty and just a pathway to whatever the life that you want to live. The second thing that we're doing in Broadmoor is with the affordable rental program, because there are always going to be people who don't want to or can't, for a variety of reasons, buy a home or be responsible. They might not want to be tied here, tied to this one property for all of this, or whatever circumstances they may be living in. So we have properties that we rent to that same person that's under market rate. And so you can live in Broadmoor in one of our properties for less than the market rate. We also have some people that might qualify for government grants, Section 8, things like that, that would not be able to otherwise live in Broadmoor had it not been for us. And so a part of some of that, the ways that we can protect people, is by developing more properties like that intentionally. You have to, if you remove the profits from that affordable housing stock, and think about providing people services and knowing that you're going to take not necessarily a loss, but you're not going to make as much money as possible. You're making $2 instead of 10. You're making $2. You're making money. You're not losing anything, but you're not making the maximum. If we have more civic and conscious-minded organizations or companies or individuals who are a part of that kind of work, then we can be able to grow that 5-minute, 15-minute section of the city everywhere that the space allows for.
Mm-hmm. Can I? So I have some comments, but I have a quick question. Other than just making $2 instead of $10, what funding sources are enabling you to provide housing to folks at a cost below what it costs to create that housing?
The citizens of Broadmoor. The citizens of Broadmoor enable us to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And because of the way that we're set up, everyone in Broadmoor, and this is not just Broadmoor, everybody. This is all of those neighborhood associations and special taxing districts and all of that. They have the same power. At Broadmoor, at the Broadmoor Improvement Association, that is a part of our charge, making sure that Broadmoor reflects the city of New Orleans, the entire city of New Orleans. And so with that, the citizens of Broadmoor, that parcel fee, that helps fund that. Mm-hmm. Not all of it, but it helps fund that. And so that is the citizens of Broadmoor saying, okay, we want to do this through our board, and then we collaborate and we make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So, clap again. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be quick. Affordable housing is an issue in virtually every city in the U.S. And one reason is because the top 10% of us probably earn 90% more in real dollars than we did as recently as 2000. The bottom 40% of us earn probably roughly what we earned in real dollars. So guess who gets to buy all the right houses they want? And when you have a place that is really appeals to the housing market dominated by folks without kids who want to live in wonderful neighborhoods, guess what happens? Okay, gentrification. All right, this is a national issue. It simply costs more to build a new housing unit than probably at least 50% of us can afford. So your organization is doing something extraordinary. You're getting help from your neighborhood, which is terrific. My guess is that every neighborhood in New Orleans needs one of you, but that is not going to happen because there is one of you in every neighborhood or a couple of you. It's going to happen because there is city leadership that is working with neighborhoods to found groups like yours. Is this fair? And I'm wondering if you feel that that leadership is here.
Well, all right, I guess it's another question
I'm
for
sorry,
me.
that was not a political statement. Think of that as, this is just, I'm sorry, this is an essential step
Yeah.
no matter what city you are, okay?
So in my opinion, the neighborhoods in New Orleans exist to serve that neighborhood in New Orleans. And you had a term on the presentation, the NIMBYism. And if an organization, if a group of homeowners, a homeowner association, neighborhood association, what have you, decides that their stance is going to be in opposition to, let's say, a new apartment complex, and so that could contain affordable rentals and affordable living spaces for people. That is that neighborhood organization that is saying that, okay, we are saying that we don't want to do this in this way. They might not be aligned to that. And so I think that New Orleans, the way that it's set up is through its neighborhoods. Each neighborhood is an individual and vibrant place in itself. And that separation is what makes New Orleans cool. And at the same time, it does reflect competing priorities. Not everybody wants to have the kind of place that you're describing. Some people, some neighborhoods want to preserve and protect the way or the property values of that neighborhood. That's just natural. We just have a different philosophy in Broadmoor, and we have a different mission, and we share that mission with a bunch of other neighborhoods in the city. Is the application of that desire, the application of our values and our mission that just sets us apart from everyone else.
Thank you.
I just want to add, I think leadership is critical, of course, but I think it's everybody's responsibility. I think as, community leaders, organizations, the private business leaders, they all need to take part in this conversation because, as you said, the studies show that owning a house is at the root of building that generational wealth. So we need to continue down that path. There are many studies, but it's bridging all gaps. That is one, but going back to education, we need to start preparing our youth for the jobs of the future, and we need to prepare the current adults for the opportunities in different areas that are, low-hanging fruit, but maybe have not had the opportunity to access the right training and education. So I just think we all have something, our work cut out and something to contribute.
And if I could just add to that briefly, I agree entirely with Myra and think that, David, we need to flip your script. I mean, certainly we want competent elected officials who are going to support neighborhoods, but it's up to us to demand that and ask for it. And if you all could bear with me very briefly to tell a Katrina story. I lost my house. I found out I was pregnant right before. I joked my husband and I waited like 10 years to have a kid right when he lost his job. And, we were displaced, living in a different neighborhood. And we're walking, out to meet someone. And I ran into a community activist that I'd known for many years. And truth be told, this woman intimidated the heck out of me. She was tough as nails. And I was like, okay, I'm going to hear, her diatribe about, how we're doing everything wrong. And she said to me, we're going to look back on this time very fondly and realize it as a very special time. There I was, pregnant, homeless, thinking we had no idea what was going to happen to this city. And I'm thinking, wow, she's really gone off her rocker. But as time went on, I realized what she was tapping into, and the fact that people, regular people, not our elected officials, came out, got involved, demanded change. David talked about managing change. It's up to us. And, I think that what I would love to see in New Orleans is to re-find that urgency that we had after the storm. We can think about so many policies that have been put into place, so many organizations that have done good work, but that isn't the past, right? How do we harness it to get people to reclaim that urgency?
And just to add to that, we know it can be done. We just lived it a few months ago, preparing for Super Bowl. Everybody thought we weren't going to be ready, this, that, the other. But the private and the public sectors got together, and regionally too. That's one thing we've learned, I think, after Katrina. We learned to work as a region instead of just one city and another parish. We're working for the state as well. So, thank you.
Man, to add to that, looking back on Katrina fondly, I remember going through neighborhoods to look at the refrigerator art. Y'all remember that? And I remember looking at the clock, talking to my friends, looking at the clock. Oh, it's 9 o'clock. We gotta hurry up and find somewhere to get something to eat because everything closes at 10. Yeah. Or we're gonna have to go and eat hamburgers at Tropical Owl. And I'm tired of hamburgers. Yeah. And so remembering the Great Scramble and all of those things, because it was a fun time. It was like neighbors and people who, yeah, we know our neighbors, but do we know the people around the corner? We might, because there's a frozen cup lady over there. And when she started selling the frozen cups again, everybody went. And so I do have to say that that lady was right. There are some great things that came out of that, and it's mostly the positive memories and shared experiences out of that very dreary time.
All right, so let me ask. Katrina was a galvanizing moment. Okay. As I've heard from many of you and heard just now from the three of you in our earlier discussions, it's not as if Katrina finished and then no new challenges appeared. I actually heard recently there's been a challenge to the master plan, God forbid. Anyway, are you all still, is the spirit of working together still as alive as it needs to be? In other words, as you look out, do you see partners here and yourselves as partners in common cause? Is the grassroots still able to shape this city in the way it did after Katrina?
In my case, definitely. I think my organization has grown exponentially after Katrina. I've been able to collaborate with many organizations that do similar work or our missions align. And I think that's the only way to really grow, if you're working together as a community. The elephant in the room, as you know, right now the Hispanic community is going through some particular challenges, but that doesn't mean we're not going to get through them. And I think more than ever, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, I need to continue working down the same path and working with all of these other organizations that have supported my mission. For the past 14 years, I've been in this role, and even before. So I think so. We recently saw another example of collaboration when New Orleans was experiencing a very difficult time with crime, and the private sectors, organizations, nonprofits, everybody came together for the NOLA Coalition, and that has really changed or turned things around as it respects to crime. So yes, I think when we come together, we bring, we just hold people accountable, our leaders accountable, and everything seems to work better.
Thank you. I believe we were going to finish 8 minutes ago. Is that correct? Okay. So how many of you have lives and other things you have to do? Okay, no. All right, well, I want to, first of all, thank the three organizations that brought us here. And I want to just point out, these folks aren't preservation. No, I'm sure you all believe in preservation, but the community that organized this invited the larger community in to be part of this. And please acknowledge that, because I think that the preservation community, from my experience, has been such an important leader in enabling this city to have a living legacy and living culture. I did a downtown plan for Memphis. Memphis has Beale Street. Beale Street is a museum of itself. Believe me, nothing is deader than, well, I love museums, but than a museum of jazz. I'll put it that way. Anyway, I can't get out of that statement. But you have all worked together to keep it alive. So just please keep on doing that. This is a wonderful place. It's an honor to be back here, and thank you to my colleagues and to all of you. Oh, and I have to recognize somebody who doesn't expect this, Leslie Alley, who was, don't frown, Leslie. Leslie was one of the two leaders for the city, planning leaders, who really enabled us to do anything we did and supported us every inch of the way. And boy, did they give us good advice before we showed up to a city council and said the wrong thing. So thank you. Sorry, there's a comment. Yes.
Excuse me. I would just like to say this here. On behalf of the original Wild Chapel Tulip, I'm Big Queen Mercy. My mother was Queen Mercy, the original Wild Chapel Tulip. My drummer is Miss Danny. And let me tell you guys something. After the storm, this lady came to New Orleans and took a liking to our tribe, which is the original Wild Chapel Tulip. Her and the Skins and Bones. She traded away from them. She's been with me ever since. And I say that to say this here. My mother had 4 girls and 4 boys. Queen Mercy, original Wild Chapel Tulip. She installed one thing. If you ain't got nothing in New Orleans called land, if you got a lane, you got a plane. She made sure each and every last one of us brought a house. A house. Latoya, before she became, I was the person who made sure Latoya became mayor. She met me coming through the culture. But before that, before I brought my house, I went to Broadmoor Community Center on General Taylor Street. My mother brought each and every last one of us. They showed us how to go through the program and to become homeowners. And my son was 22 years old when he brought a house. And I say that to say this here. People don't understand the uniqueness of New Orleans. They don't understand that uniqueness. New Orleans is the beauty of what you see is what you get. And you don't, and this is what people don't understand. After the storm, they flew here. We grew here. And I'm done.
Okay. So you have just met the speaker 2 years from now at the next Morrison Lecture. Thank you.